Alright, boys and girls, so here is our first reading lesson for today, for Tuesday. We are going to be comparing and contrasting how the two different novel excerpts have like the same theme, okay? So what you're going to be able to do is read to identify and annotate information about a theme, integrate information from more than one text to answer a close reading question about theme. And this is not theme as in like the moral of the story. This is more like theme as in kind of like how they're feeling and overall feeling. And you're going to write a well-organized response using details from more than one text to compare and contrast the theme. Alright, so here's our close reading question. It says we are going to reread paragraphs 3 through 5 in Camp Life and 2 through 13 in Games in the Woods. So if you're not there yet, let's go ahead and make sure you are open to Camp Life. And in both Camp Life and Games in the Wood, the adventure is like that central theme. So that's basically what it's mostly about. It's all about adventure. We're going to compare and contrast the characters' experience of the adventure in both excerpts. All right, we're going to jot down notes in the margins to help us with this. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure we're on 3 through 5 of Camp Life. So here is the beginning of 3, so please be on page 13. Alright, so 3. They found plenty of things to be delighted with, but nothing to be astonished at. They discovered that the island was about 3 miles long and a quarter of a mile wide, and that the shore it lay closest to was only separated from it by a narrow channel hardly 200 yards wide. They took a swim about every hour, so it was close upon the middle of the afternoon when they got back to camp. All right, paragraph 4. They were too hungry to stop to fish, but they fared sumptuously upon cold ham, so they had some cold ham, and then threw themselves down in the shade to talk. But the talk soon began to drag and then died. The stillness and the solemnity that brooded in the woods and the sense of loneliness began to tell upon the spirits of the boys. They fell to thinking. A sort of undefined longing crept upon them. This took dim shape. Presently it was budding homesickness. Even Fenn the red-handed, which remember we looked at our footnotes, is Huck's pirate, so it's Huck, was dreaming of his doorsteps and empty hogsheads, but they were all ashamed of their weakness, and none was brave enough to speak his thought. Okay, so let's look at what kind of feelings we have going on here. Okay, so it kind of changes throughout. So you have the feelings, and you can underline this, or I'm not sure if Ms. Mattoon is giving you a chart, but you can either write in your chart underneath Camp Life, or we can just highlight it. So you have a feeling of homesickness that starts to come upon them. Okay. They are also starting to feel lonely. Okay, if we go to the next page, or where we just were, here the mood's a little different. Let's highlight some of the feelings. Oh, that's my pen. All right. So here we see that they were delighted. They're also, there's nothing, so nothing to be astonished. So they weren't really, blown away by what they found out. They are discovering things. So you should have 3 different types of feelings or kind of what they're going through for this for camp life. Alright, so you have delighted, they were not really astonished, and then they were discovering things. And then once they were done, you flipped over to the next page, and they were lonely, then they became lonely and homesick. Alright, now we're going to go to Games in the Woods. Let's make sure I go back to the right spot. So 2 through 13. And you're going to have to turn back to the left a couple of times. Alright, so 2 starts here. Let me zoom in. Alright, he said cautiously to an imaginary company, "Hold, my merry men, keep hid till I blow." Now appeared Joe Harper, as airily clad and elaborately armed as Tom. Tom called, "Hold! Who comes here into Sherwood Forest without my pass?" "Guy of Gooseborn, once no man's pass. Who art thou?" "That," remember this is the part where he kind of forgets his line. "Dares to hold such language," said Tom, prompting, for they talked by the book from memory. "Who art thou that dares to hold such language?" "I, indeed, I am Robin Hood, as thy carcass soon shall know." "Then art thou indeed the famous outlaw? Right gladly will I dispute with thee the passes of Merry Wood. Have it at thee." They took their lath swords, dumped their other traps on the ground, struck a fencing attitude, foot to foot, and began a grave, careful combat, 2 up, 2 down. Presently Tom said, "Now, if you've got the hang, go lively." Alright, and we stop there. So what do we have going on in this story? The characters are pretty enthusiastic about playing Robin Hood, right? They're really into it. Sorry, I came from my highlighters. Alright, so first they are playing Robin Hood. Okay. They're having a lot of fun. So you might just write over here. It may not be something that we can exactly highlight, but we can type it in here. So they're having fun. And they are not sad or quiet. Oops, sorry. There you go. So they're playing Robin Hood. Okay, and they're having a lot of fun. And they're not really sad or quiet. I'll give you a second to copy that down. Alright, so let's compare these 2 stories then. Theme of adventure. So you have this story, they're having a lot of fun. They're not really sad, they're not really quiet, and they're quite lively. Okay? But then when you go to the other ones, some of the words that we highlighted were it was kind of like the opposite. They weren't really astonished. They were trying to discover things. It has a little more serious approach to it. Then they become lonely and start to become homesick. Okay, so you've got 2 different stories. This one seems a lot more serious than Games in the Woods. That one's a lot more playful. But this one's a little more, the boys are a little more thoughtful in it. Okay, they're really thinking about what's going on. Whereas in Game in the Woods, it's kind of like they're just having fun. They're kind of carefree. They're just having a good time, and they're not really being too thoughtful. They're just playing Robin Hood. Okay? So if I go back to my close reading prompt, let's see if we can answer it. Alright, compare and contrast the characters' experience of adventure. So they both had adventure, but like I just said, one was very carefree. Game in the Woods was very carefree. But camp life was a little different. They were thinking a little more about things. They're a little more serious. And they started to kind of like not really have fun. They started becoming homesick. All right. So what you're going to do for the next about 5 minutes, I want you to try this close reading prompt with a partner. Okay, this one's going to say reread paragraphs 21 through 24 in Camp Life and reread Becky Returns. So the whole Becky Returns. Rebellion is a key theme in both of Camp Life and Becky Returns. And I just want you to work with a partner and compare and contrast how the characters rebel in both excerpts. So you can write it in the margins if you find a spot where the characters rebel. You can just write it in your margins and that'll be fine. So just take about 5 minutes and talk to a partner about how those characters in Camp Life and Becky Returns, how they're similar and how they're different as they're rebelling. All right, boys and girls, that's it for this lesson.